Hey everyone, David C. Anderson here coming at you from the Knife Center. And today we're taking a look at some of the best hard use folding knives that you can get your hands on in 2020. Let's check them out. So sometimes you just need a pocket knife that's going to stand up to absolutely everything. And that's where these overbuilt hard use folders come into play. Now the reason I put little quotation marks around hard use is it's going to help if we actually define what we mean by hard use knives. Now what these aren't are cheap little knives that you aren't afraid to really thrash on because you're not going to care when they break. These are heavy duty blades that you're not going to have to worry about breaking in the first place. Now we all want good edge retention on our knives, and some of these do feature some premium steels, but the primary focus, or I should say the bigger priorities with the designs we're looking at today, are that heavy duty build quality. Toughness, durability, and strength are at the top of our list of attributes that we're looking for right now. So the first one we're going to look at comes from a brand that's sort of synonymous with hard use tactical knives, and that's Emerson. This is the Super Commander, coming in right now in 2020 at about $310. As you can tell right away by the size of it in my hands, this is a larger knife. We've got about a 4-inch blade of 154 cm steel, backed up by G10 handles and actually a titanium liner lock, where most folks will use steel instead. We get titanium with the Emerson. Now in addition to just being built very well and very robust, there's a few things that kind of make this an excellent choice for a hard use folder. The first is the G10. Now Emersons are certainly known for having a lot of traction on their G10, and that's going to be great for giving you a rock solid grip when you go to use it. You're not going to have to worry about it slipping out of your hands. Now, as far as the blade, it's kind of a hybrid of a few different things. At first glance, you can definitely see the prominent recurve, and it's kind of a drop point shape, but in fact, right here at the point, we actually have a straight clip going on. In any case, I think the tip is going to perform or behave more like a drop point, but that recurve edge, especially with the serrations here, is going to be great for hooking in and digging into material that you're cutting through, especially on fibrous things like rope or even cardboard. You're not going to have to worry so much about your blade slipping out of the cut when you're really going to town. In addition to that, you can open it a couple of different ways. We've got an ambidextrous thumb plate here so that you can open it with either hand, either left or right-handed. Of course, the liner lock is right-hand biased though, and the pocket clip is set up on the right side only, so you're not going to be able to switch that around to either side. But on top of that, we've also got Emerson's patented wave-shaped opener. So that's a little hook here right on the spine, and that's designed as you're pulling it out of your pocket, you can make that catch on the hem, and it'll rotate the blade open as you draw the knife, and it's ready to go, and you can get to cutting right away. One more thing that's always appreciated on a harder use knife where you might be getting down and dirty, getting in the mud, in the grit, we've got an open-backed construction on this knife. We've just got a couple of standoffs holding the sides together, so it's going to be easy to rinse out or blow debris out of when you're done doing your tasks. That's the Emerson Super Commander, and if this is a little big for you, if you want kind of the same attributes in a slightly smaller size, there are a few different sizes of the Commander that you can take a look at on our site. So when it comes to a hard use folder, at the heart of things that's going to make the biggest difference is the locking mechanism. And that's why we've got to talk about Cold Steel's Triad lock that you see here on their SR1 folder. Now, I've talked a lot about the Triad lock here on the channel, but if you haven't seen any of those before or you're not familiar with this lock, it looks like an ordinary lock back. But underneath the hood, as they say, there have been a few improvements in terms of the lock face geometry itself, but also through the addition of things like a stop pin. They've basically created this lock in a way that over time, as it wears in, it's not going to kind of go out of spec. It's not going to wear away and get loose on you. It's going to stay nice and tight over time. And the way they distribute the forces that act on the blade make it one of the strongest locking mechanisms on the market today. And it's showcased perfectly here on their SR1 folder. First off, we've got another 4-inch blade, S35VN in this case. Still pretty tough, but it's going to have even more edge retention than the 154 cm on that Emerson. And it's 3/16 of an inch thick. This is definitely a beastly blade on such a small folder. And when you combine that with the Tonto profile you see here, it's going to make a great knife for using the tip. I wouldn't recommend prying with a folder. Obviously, if you want to do some prying, first of all, get a pry bar. But if you're going to use a knife for prying, I'd recommend a fixed blade. But in terms of tip strength and actual rigidity, it's going to be hard to beat this SR1 right here. Now you can also get it in a clip point profile if you want a more acute tip, a little better for finer piercing. If you need that strength, the Tonto is definitely the way to go. Handles are G10 as well, a little bit of traction there. Not quite as much as the Emerson, but still a good amount to keep your hand secure. And that's backed up by the shape of the handle as well. We've got a nice prominent finger guard here at the front, as well as a nice beak here at the back. I wear a size large work glove and I still fit in there pretty well. It's not really cramping me too much. Although if you have super large hands, it may get in the way just a little bit. But you do have an area up in front of the finger guard that you can choke up on. Not quite a full-size finger choil, but you can get up there, get a little more control of the blade and kind of extend the reach of the knife just a little bit. Another advantage of the triad lock or any kind of lock back over, let's say, a liner lock is it's not biased to one hand or the other. This is going to be a good ambidextrous option. That's also the case with the pocket clip too. This is going to go on either side of the knife, whichever one you wish. It makes this a great hard use folder for just about anyone out there. It's really going to be able to take a lot of abuse, and they're not priced too sky high either. They're about $150 or a little bit over, about $156 for the Tonto version. So I tried to narrow it down to just one cold steel, but I had to do two. The new Formax Scout, newly available for 2020, is going to be another phenomenal hard use folder. Now, the Formax, of course, has been out before, but they've been pricier. They've got more premium materials, and some of them have been over 200 bucks. This one right here is pretty affordable, or pretty attainable anyway, at just over 110. And the way they've done that is by altering the materials just a little bit. It's still a big, beefy knife. You've got this broad drop point blade, triad lock again, and a huge handle. Definitely a ton of room. You can see I've got a lot of extra space here at the end, even though it is starting to curl up a little bit. And then a full finger choil here at the front. A little bit on the shallower side, but definitely enough space to get up there, and you've got a ton of reach going on. You can even use that kickback in the handle to kind of choke back a little bit. And again, if you really want to do some chopping with your knife, I'd recommend a fixed blade, but the way this handle is shaped, it's almost like they want you to chop with this blade. So now that I've talked about the design, I'll mention the materials. The handles are Grivex in this case. They're not G10 or aluminum or anything like that. And we've got an orange peel texture going on here, kind of like a really rough sandpaper, although it's not, I shouldn't say that. Sandpaper would feel kind of like it might cut you. This doesn't, but you definitely feel like you have a solid grip going on. And the blade steel here is AUS 10, which we're seeing a lot of in Cold Steel's lineup this year. And it's a definite upgrade over AUS 8, which is a lot of entry-level knives will come with. And basically what you're gonna get over AUS 8, you're definitely gonna get more edge retention, and it should be able to take a keener edge. And again, with a nice broad blade like this, thick, not quite as thick as the SR1, it is a little bit thinner, but it's gonna be able to stand up to a ton of work. The slicing geometry is gonna be a little bit better on this knife too. Even though it is thick, like I said, it is a little bit thinner, and we've got a nice high flat grind going on, and a good stone-washed finish, which is another great feature on a hard-working knife. Because a stone-washed finish, because you kind of have like a micro scratch pattern going on, or a micro polished tumbled finish going on. As you use the knife and put scratches on it, they're not going to stand out as much, which is going to keep your knife looking nicer longer as you actually use it. All right, now we've got another new for 2020 knife from a brand that kind of made their name on overbuilt knives. And actually it used to, on their boxes, even say overbuilt here in the USA. This is the 308 from Zero Tolerance. They're still overbuilt in the USA, it just doesn't say that on the box anymore. Now the 308 is a relaunch of their 300 series, which actually is what put them on the map, and it kind of appropriately comes in at 300 bucks. Blade stock here comes in at a little bit over 1/8 of an inch, and we've got CPM 20 CV blade steel. Not a super tough steel at the end of the day, although it's going to give you plenty of toughness for use on a folder like this, but it's going to give you a lot of edge retention, more so than anything else we've seen here. Again, we've got a nice stone-washed finish, another broad drop point blade, this time with a little bit of a harpoon tip, and a nice high flat grind. It's going to be a little bit more efficient of a slicer than that Formax. So maybe a little bit more appropriate for your day-to-day, but still has the capability to throw down on bigger jobs. The handle backs up the performance with solid construction. We've got G10 on the front and a titanium frame lock on the back. Definitely in ZT fashion, it is a titanium frame lock. We've also got a nice milled texture going on. It's not super aggressive, but it does increase the surface area, so you get a good grip. And there's even a little bit of a contour to both sides of the handle to help it fit in the hand even better. It's a ZT, so the action is good. We've got KVT ball bearings in the pivot, so it flips nice and crisp, even with such a large blade like that. But the pivot in this 308 really goes a long way to cementing this Zero Tolerance as a hard use folder. As you can see, it's oversized, and the bolt itself is a full 1/4 inch thick, going all the way through both sides of the handle. And then as sort of a nod to the hard use and rugged nature of it, you're not going to be able to adjust this with a standard screwdriver or a Torx bit. You can actually fit a 1/2 inch box wrench around the pivot here if you ever need to adjust it. Kind of an interesting touch and another way to avoid carrying some extra specialized tools just to adjust your knife pivot. This knife is definitely ready to throw down on some big jobs, just like everything else so far. All right, now we're going to go with something a little bit smaller but no less durable. This is the Steelker, coming in at about 165 right now. The blade here is a little bit shorter, as I mentioned. We got about 3.5 inches, or maybe just a little bit under, and we've got a blackened stonewash finish here, which feels like one of those nice apocalyptic finishes, especially on a rugged folder like this. Now the steel here is Sleipner steel, which is sort of a modification of D2, which is, even though it's not a super tough steel, it's certainly gained a reputation for being very durable and having a very long-lasting and very hard-working edge. In fact, Lion Steel actually says that their Sleipner really kind of surpasses M390 in terms of its edge retention, which is one of those great premium steels out there. In fact, the 20 CV we just looked at on that ZT knife is an American equivalent to M390, so it's a pretty bold claim. In addition to the great steel, I love the construction of this knife. Now, this does come with a pocket clip. It's a wire clip that is reversible for each side, but I've actually taken the clip off of this one, and as I was doing that, I got to appreciate the way this knife was built and all of the rugged internals. They're definitely overbuilt, and I was definitely impressed with certainly how solid and well put together this knife is. It's one of those that as soon as you hold it, you really can feel that solidity. There's a few different versions available. This one has brown G10 and that blackened stonewash finish, as I said. It's got some nice touches like an inset liner lock. That's one thing that actually makes this a pretty comfortable knife. That's, of course, in addition to the handle shape itself. It's not something that melts into the hand, but it's certainly something that feels rock solid there. Part of that's due to the nice solid backspacer here that creates a really strong backbone for the knife. And there's some nice Italian details too. You see it's kind of rounded over or crowned, and you see that on the spine of the knife as well, which is great for comfort, and it's something you see the Italians do a lot on their knives, but especially on a hard-working knife when you might really be bearing down on the blade with your thumb, it's really appreciated. And it flips well too, just like the ZT. We've got bearings in the pivot, IKBS in this case. Nice solid action, Lion Steel Kerr. All right, next up is a knife from DPX, and this is actually, though, a knife made by Lion Steel as well. Now, DPX is an American company, but they have a few different brands making knives for them, including the Hest model. But this one right here happens to be made, as I said, by Lion Steel. Now, the reason I mentioned that Lion Steel connection is it's going to be important a little bit when I flip this knife over, and I'll get to that. The blade here, a little bit shorter again. We're about 3¼ inches D2 steel in this case, but still plenty thick for durability. This particular one comes with a black finish and a green G10 front scale. And when I turn it over, this is a frame locking knife, titanium, and the Lion Steel connection comes in right here with their patented rotoblock system. So I didn't talk much about the advantages of the frame lock when we were talking about that ZT, so I'll mention it now. Definitely a strong locking mechanism out there today, thanks in part to the very thick lock bar that most frame locks come with. In addition to that, because of the way it's exposed, the harder you grip the knife, the more secure it's going to be. Not that it's unsecure if you're not gripping it hard, but if you're really bearing down on something and really putting pressure on it, it's even less likely to pop out of place. And if all of that wasn't enough already, that Lion Steel innovation right here, simply twist that lock right there, and the lock bar is further locked down from behind. So again, even less chance of it slipping out, because even if you were trying to, you can't actually push the lock bar out of the way until you undo that lock. Now, it's important to note, as I said, the Lion Steel connection, which is an Italian company. If you go to our website and you are looking at the Hest models and want to make sure that you get one that has this, make sure you're filtering by the Italian-made ones, because they do make this model in America too, but those aren't going to come with that feature. Speaking of features, we've got a couple other really nice things, including a nice big deep carry pocket clip, as well as a glass breaker here on the pommel. And the lanyard hole can even work as a hex bit driver or a standard screwdriver bit holder right there if you need to turn a screw or turn a screw head in a pinch. Now, the jimping here on the thumb ramp is actually a couple of different sizes because they say you can use that actually as a wire stripper, so it's helpful to have a couple of different gauges. Then right here in front of the dual thumb studs, we've got a notch in the spine of the blade, and that does two things for you. For the first, it works as a bottle opener, so technically I think this is a multi-tool, but also similar to that Emerson wave we looked at earlier, you can use that to catch the hem of your pocket as you draw the knife and rotate the blade open. You know, the DPX Hest is definitely a solid design and one of the most carryable options that I've got on the table here, priced right now at $175. All right, next we've got another D2 steel folder. This is the Benchmade Adamas, coming in just under 200 bucks. We're getting bigger with the blade again. We're about just over 3.8 inches with a nice strong drop point profile. Now this is not going to be as efficient a cutter as say the Lion Steel or the ZT we just looked at, both with nice high or full flat grinds. We still have a flat grind, but it's more of a mid-height or a saber grind. But we've got a nice swedge here at the tip, keeping the tip a little bit more acute for penetration, but because most of the thickness of the blade has been left for most of the length of the blade itself, you're going to have a good amount of strength going on. Now, I've actually got a friend, Scott Gossman, a knife maker, who loves taking production folders and actually just completely abusing and thrashing them, and he has put one of these Adamas knives through the ringer and it's come through with flying colors. He'll hammer on these things, baton with them, do all kinds of crazy stuff that you'd never want to do with a folder, and he's never had a problem with his Adamas. The handles here are G10. They're a little bit on the blockier side, which if you're just kind of looking at it without holding it, you might think they are a little bit uncomfortable, but it's actually not the case. Was always quite surprised with how nicely these fit in the hand. There's the Desert Tan version here, but you can also get black. In terms of the blade, you've got a plain edge here, but you can also get a partially serrated option. But at the heart of this knife is Benchmade's Axis lock, their crossbar style lock that runs through both sides of the handle and anchors the tang of the blade in place. This is again one of the stronger locking mechanisms on the market thanks to that nice big piece of steel going through there, and it's a really good option again for ambidextrous use, kind of like the Triad lock from earlier. Because you can access it from both sides, lefties and righties will have no problem using it, and that's backed up by the pocket clip as well. Although this is a big knife, and if you don't want to carry it in the pocket, they actually include a MOLLE compatible belt pouch with this as well. But back to the strength, you can see by the liners they use here, they're a little bit on the thicker side, and they do run the full length of the blade. They're not inset, they're not just partial. You've got a full, nice rigid skeleton backing up the blade of this knife. But despite that overbuilt nature, it's still got great action. Pull the lock bar back, and you can flick it open and close no problem. But if you do want faster action, there's even an automatic version of this available. All right, next up we've got another newcomer. It debuted late last year. Another knife featuring a crossbar style lock. This is the SOG Seal XR. This knife comes in right now at about 170 bucks, so a little bit cheaper than the Adamas, and it has a lot of the features that make that knife so nice. It has full liners as well, although they are inset a little bit here at the back, but they peek out here near the front of the spine, and they have a lot of jimping going on. The whole knife actually has a lot of jimping going on for a lot of traction. Definitely a little less comfortable if you're bearing down on this knife without wearing gloves, so this is definitely, if you're looking for more comfort, work gloves with this knife would definitely be a good recommendation. It has SOG's XR lock, which again is their version of the crossbar style lock, and it has a reversible pocket clip. So again, this is another great ambidextrous option. And the pocket clip's nice and wide too, definitely gives you a good contact patch. A few things this knife has that the Adamas does not. We do have a little protruding piece of the backspacer here, and that actually is metal, and they're calling this a persuader tool. We'll let you read between the lines on that. And then in addition to the crossbar lock, the XR lock, we've actually got a couple of different opening methods. We've got a blade cutout for your thumb, which of course lets you open the blade a little bit more deliberately and a little less flashy. The Adamas does have thumb studs, so you can do that with that knife as well. But the other thing that this knife has is a nice, well-executed flipper mechanism. And they've actually tuned this to work very well with that XR lock, which is something that style of lock hasn't always been known for, so they've achieved that and pulled it off very well here. One other thing I like about their execution is as soon as you pull that lock bar back, it actually kicks the blade out just a little bit. So if you're doing the wrist flick, it's very easy to get that blade moving. And the blade, again, longer, about 3.9 inches, and S35 VN steel for really good edge retention and at a really good price when you consider all of this, again, only comes in at about 170 bucks. All right, next up we've got a Spyderco, and this is the Shaman, which is our favorite hard use Spyderco out there. This knife comes in at just over 200 bucks, and what you get is a broad drop point blade that's a little bit beefier than some of Spyderco's other things. To start with, we've got blade stock that's a little bit thicker than 1/8 of an inch, and instead of a full flat grind, we have an almost full flat grind. You do get the full thickness of the spine a little bit of the ways down the blade here. All combined, that gives us a little bit of a tougher blade than some of the thinner and full flat ground Spyderco blades, but you're still gonna get some good cutting performance thanks to the edge geometry here. Edge retention itself is also going to be good because we've got S30V blade steel, and again, a really nice stone washed finish to kind of complement the hard-working nature of the knife. The handle backs that up too. We've got G10, black in this case, with inset liners and Spyderco's compression lock. This is deactivated from the spine and again is a very strong mechanism on the market today. And one of the advantages of this lock, which actually it shares with the crossbar style locks that we just looked at, it allows you to keep your fingers out of the path of the blade when you're opening and closing the knife. Now that's inherently a little bit safer than locks where you have to reach over with your thumb, like with a frame lock or a liner lock to unlock the knife. And like the Axis lock and XR lock, you can even flick the blade open and closed for a little bit more speedy action. One more note about the G10 on this knife in particular, the corners are all nice and radiused over and a little bit thicker than a lot of other folders out there, although most of these folders in front of me are even thicker than this Shaman, but that's in comparison to other more run-of-the-mill folders. But because of the shape of the corners there, this is gonna be another nice and comfortable knife that you can really bear down on and really put some heavy work into. All right, just a couple more, and the first is actually a collaboration between Buck Knives and Tops Knives, who of course are very well known for their hard-use fixed blades. So naturally, when the two came together, they were gonna come up with a hard-use folder. The CCRT stands for Combat Search and Rescue Tool, and what you get here is a G10 handled folder, nice and thick as you can see. We've got dual liners in addition to a separate liner for the liner lock. Now it definitely imparts a feeling of strength. This is definitely not a lightweight knife, but it's something that I would feel very confident in putting to some heavier uses. We've got a 154 cm blade, about 3.5 inches, with a Tonto-like profile. So again, if you're looking for ultimate tip strength, this probably isn't gonna be quite as strong as that cold steel, but that Tonto shape is gonna give you a good amount of strength. And then they keep the main section here hollow ground so that it's still gonna slice a little bit better than a more obtuse grind for some of those finer work and more run-of-the-mill jobs that you might need to do. But again, like that saber grind on the Adamas, we've got a lot of full width metal here on the blade itself, so a good amount of strength again. And then on the end here, we've got a lanyard hole that, like the DPX, can drive a standard screwdriver bit as well. Now the pocket clip on this knife is reversible, but full disclosure, it's pretty thin and you might have a little bit of a hard time using it, but they actually include a belt sheath for this knife, and that's probably the way I'd want to carry it, because even more so than that Adamas earlier, this is a little bit heftier. It comes in at about 8.6 ounces, so that belt sheath is going to be appreciated, but it's a really solid knife, as I mentioned, made in America for just under 145 bucks. Now, of course, you can't talk hard-use folders without mentioning Greg Medford, and this is his 187 DP frame lock knife. We're definitely getting into a little more premium territory right now because we're talking small batch knives as opposed to larger run production like most of this other stuff. Price on this is $475. For that, you get a chunky and absolutely bomb-proof titanium handle. You can see how thick it is here to provide a ton of strength for this knife. The blade here is D2 with a very rugged PVD coating and a nice large blade, about 4¼ inches. Nice and thick, again, with a lot of full width here for strength, and a hollow grind to keep the edge a little thinner and help it slice a little bit better. Now that PVD, of course, is very rugged and it's gonna stand up well over time, but then the titanium handles feature a stone-washed finish, which has all the same advantages of a stone-washed blade, only it's not gonna be getting scuffed up from cutting, but it may, as you use it in your pocket and use it at a work site or on the job, or whatever you're using it for, you're not gonna have to worry about how the handles look over time. Open back construction on this knife again, also easy to clean out. And we've got a nice big milled titanium pocket clip on the right side. All this comes together in a knife that as soon as you pick it up, it feels rock solid. It's made in America, and it's gonna be able to take just about anything you could throw at it. Right, last but certainly far from least is the Hinderer Knives XM18. This design has been highly influential in the world of hard use folders, and as soon as you pick one up, it's very easy to see why. This particular one I'm holding comes in at $425, and we've got a CPM 20 CV blade with a nice heavy stone washed finish. The handle here is G10, red in this case with a little bit of texture, and we've got a titanium frame lock on the back, and as soon as you hold this knife, the blade itself angles just a little bit down, and it really feels like it's eager to get to work and it's eager to just start cutting whatever's in front of it. Blade length is 3.5 inches, and this is their spear point profile, although this design does come with a few different blade variations. We've got a mid-height flat grind, again, a good compromise between cutting capability and strength. And we've also got a nice swedge along the spine to help remove that drag point as you're moving through materials. If you do want something bigger, we've also got the XM24, which comes in with about a 4-inch blade. But any of these designs you choose is going to be something you can depend on for life, and it's really going to be there for when you need it. The Hinderer XM18. So that's it for our list of the best hard use folders that you can get right now in 2020. And I want to know which one of these was your favorites, or if you'd rather carry something else, let us know any of those things in the comments. In the meantime, if you want to get your hands on any of these knives, we're going to leave links in the description to take you over to KnifeCenter.com, and make sure you're signed up for our Knife Rewards program while you're there, because if you're going to buy a cool knife like this, you might as well earn some free money to spend on your next one. I'm David C. Anderson from the Knife Center, signing off. See you next time.
Okay.
I know what I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does make it better.
Go.
Now you can all... Never mind. I guess I don't pay attention to what I do.
Unfortunately, I have to.
You're going to have a fun day today, aren't you?